People live together all the time with roommates, especially as young adults trying to pay the bills, especially in today's economy, but really always. Just as Donna and Jason Slaughter did, they invited Michael Haegele to live with them in a mobile home in Marion County, Georgia. Jason Slaughter was only 23 years old. Donna Slaughter was 30, and they all lived together, seemingly a great relationship. But in May of 2010, the Slaughters, Jason and Donna, reported their roommate missing. They claimed he was a male prostitute and a homosexual who would get rides to Columbus, and he'd shown up missing. As good roommates might do, they consented to a search of his room and allowed the police to come in and search his room. And they then got a search warrant for the entire residence. During that search, police discovered romantic letters suggesting a relationship between Haegele and his roommate, Jason Slaughter. They also found insurance policies listing each other as beneficiaries. At first, this seemed like a love triangle gone wrong, but as investigators dug deeper, a much darker motive emerged: greed. The sin? Greed, defined as an intense selfish desire for something, an excessive extreme desire for something, often more than one's proper share. That's the why behind the crime, the motive. I'm Ashley Willcott, and as a TV anchor, a former judge, a trial attorney, almost every case I've ever seen has intersected with one of the 7 deadly sins as motive. Pride, greed, wrath, envy, lust, gluttony, and sloth, the opposite of the 7 heavenly virtues. Temptations that, taken too far, turn deadly. This week, we break down the case, the crimes and convictions of Jason and Donna Slaughter, and the deadly sin of greed. Their roommate, Michael Haegele, sought friendship and belonging, and instead, he became the victim of cold-blooded betrayal. A little bit later, I am joined by a former GBI agent, Trebor Randle, on the breakdown segment, where we go deep on the how and the why of one that seemed like a strange love triangle turned out to be a calculated plot for profit. Let's get into it. This is the Deadly 7. Let's look back at how it all began. In early 2009, Michael Haegele was only 21 years old, and he decided to leave St. Louis, Missouri, and find a new life in rural Georgia. He had met 23-year-old Jason Slaughter online, and after speaking to him, developing this relationship, he decided to move into the Slaughter's trailer, located on Palm Drive in Marion County, Georgia. What Michael didn't know, at least at first, is that Jason was actually married. He had a wife. She lived in the home as well. Her name was Donna. But they all 3 lived together in the mobile home, and family members would later say that Michael really felt loved and welcomed, and that he felt like he was building a new home with people that he trusted. The day of the murder of Michael, May 6th of 2010, his life came to a brutal end inside that very trailer. According to GBI reports and testimony from the court trial against Donna and Jason, Donna Slaughter later admitted that she loaded a single bullet into a handgun, walked up behind Michael as he sat on the couch where they lived together in the home, and shot him in the back of the head. But it didn't end there. Jason and Donna worked together to stage a gruesome scene. The pictures are disturbing and horrifying. They wrote anti-gay slurs like fag equals hell and KKK on Michael's skin. And then they repeatedly hit his body with a hammer to create fake bruising, an attempt to make this killing look like a hate crime committed by someone else. And again, Donna admitted to this later. and there was testimony at the trial, that the next thing Jason and Donna did, without regard to the fact this was a human life they had just snuffed out, they stuffed his body into a plastic tub and they drove 30 miles to Butler Mill Road. Now, this was along the Macon-Marion County line. No indication why this is where they picked, but they decided to then put him in a ditch and dumped his body. How was he discovered? How was his body found? Well, the very next morning, May 7th, there was a school bus driver. Imagine, on her morning route, kids were in the bus that she was picking up and taking to school. They spotted the body, and it was a gruesome discovery that shocked the entire small, close-knit rural community. At first, they found the body, and Michael was a John Doe. They had no idea who this person was. They worked around the clock, investigators from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, to identify the victim. And here's a wild twist. Days later, as they're trying to identify who this is, days later, Jason Slaughter himself called the GBI and reported that their roommate, Michael, well, he'd been missing since May 1st of that year. Well, that story unraveled quickly. On May 12th, after the GBI interviewed both Jason and Donna, they arrested the couple and charged them with murder. The motive? Greed. As the investigators continued to investigate and everything unfolded, the truth came into focus. This was never just about jealousy or love and a relationship between three people living together. It was about money. Here's what the investigators discovered. They found 2 life insurance policies, a $500,000 policy on Michael Haegele's life, with Jason listed as the beneficiary, and a $250,000 policy on a man in Delaware who had also died under suspicious circumstances way back in 2007, 3 years before. The Slaughters' plan was chillingly simple. They would befriend vulnerable men, take out life insurance policies, and then eliminate them for profit. Michael Haegele had unknowingly become the second victim in a murder for money scheme. Jason and Donna Slaughter, after they were arrested, they were held without bond, and Donna did later confess. Even reenacting the murder, all the disturbing details I just shared with you, she reenacted that on video for the investigators. Both were convicted of the murder of Michael Haegele. They were sentenced to life in prison plus 15 years. In 2012, 2 years later, Delaware prosecutors charged Jason with the earlier insurance-linked murder, alleging a deadly pattern driven by greed. Joining me now is a former GBI agent Trebor Randle, and even more importantly, we have worked together. You are my friend. I trust you. I value you. And I can't wait to break down this particular crime, because the reality is you have this innocent 21-year-old Michael Haegele doing what many people do now, which is meet people online. And he moves to rural Georgia to live with the Slaughters. And when they do this, they all live together. He says to people, yeah, I felt like I found family, people that I can trust. Tell me your initial thoughts about this case as an ex-GBI agent.
My initial thoughts about this case, Ashley, is um, how twisted things can get when you have anonymity behind a keyboard. Those are my first thoughts. Knowing how this relationship came to be with the 3 individuals involved in this triangle, if you will, and how our victim in this case, in my opinion, was lured into this relationship. And obviously, he never thought that it would be his ultimate demise.
It's so sad, so tragic. But if you were investigating this and they let you search his room and then you get a search warrant for the entire house, and then you find the life insurance policies on him to the benefit of Jason Slaughter. Is that just like an aha moment? Do you say, aha, now we know, now we know, now we just need to put the evidence together to get a conviction because this has got to be the reason they killed him?
Well, it's actually so much more than that. I recall when this initially came to be and the body was located initially, and these individuals, who were the roommates, reported their roommate missing and the roommate having a promiscuous lifestyle. Um, it all kind of came together as well. This individual somehow contributed to their own demise, maybe wandering off with individuals that he didn't know. But this life insurance piece that ended up coming to light does trigger something in an investigator to say, hey, there may be something we're missing here. And as an investigator, that should always be one of the challenges that you somewhat look forward to, because that's our job, to piece together, a puzzle, finding those breadcrumbs, if you will. That's one of the things I always enjoy.
And it's not only piecing it together and finding the breadcrumbs, but I know your investigation skills. I know investigation skills of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. Add to that there was a confession. I mean, that is no small feat, not just to get a confession from Donna Slaughter about reenacting the murder on video for law enforcement, but also, Trebor, the fact that it was a confession that was done properly by the book so that it could be admissible in court. Talk about, I mean, to get a confession's one thing, but to get a person to agree to enact it on video, that stunned me.
That's no small feat, to your point. But it was so incredibly important, I believe, in this case, to go that extra mile and have one of the suspects to actually reenact what occurred in that home on that fateful night, because of the fact that Donna Slaughter was actually handicapped. So for members having, an investigator having forethought, for members of a jury, fast forward, whether it's 6 months down the line, a year or 2 years, to see this frail young woman who may or may not come into court in a wheelchair or with uh, arm braces to help assist with her mobility and her ambulating, to be able to see that and be a member of a jury, but yet she's being accused of this heinous act. An investigator has to have the forethought to say, they're not just going to believe this. They're not just going to take someone's word for it. And certainly, if a defense attorney is doing their job, they're going to be somewhat convincing. So I think an investigator has to have the forethought to say, we're going to need more than just a confession. If we can have the suspect actually walk us through what occurred on that fateful night and demonstrate exactly what she did, and the fact that she had the ability, she had the strength, obviously the opportunity to commit this crime, that was definitely going to help seal her fate, if you will.
And that's brilliant because you're right. If she testified on the stand without a confession, without a video, I can tell you most of the jury would think, no way. No way could she physically have done this, and that there were marks from a hammer hammering away on him to create fake bruises. You are absolutely right. The foresight, this investigation was stellar. I'm not surprised, but it sure is nice to see when it plays out, resulting in a conviction like it did in this case of life in prison plus 15 years. Now, when a body is found, Michael Haegele's body was found in a ditch, and I have two questions about that. The first one is, what's the first thing law enforcement does to try to identify someone when they have no identification on them? It's just a body.
One of the first things that we have to consider is that someone somewhere is looking for their loved one. possibly, or their friend or their spouse, if you will. So the first thing that we want to do is get that information out to the public that this person has been located and we need help identifying the individual. So we did that. One of the second things that you want to do is if they have any identifying marks, scars, tattoos on their body, you want to get that information out as quickly as you can as well to the public, law enforcement. One of the things that was really unique about the victim in this case is he had a surgery. And I'm sure you're well aware that oftentimes surgical instruments and surgical parts that are purchased from these manufacturers that doctors use when they place those things in our body, be it a hip replacement and different things like that, they have serial numbers. So at autopsy, obviously, we're going to collect those items and be able to trace it back, just like you would do dental records.
Mm.
So anything that you have like that, scars, marks, tattoos, dental records, if you don't have anything else, or in this case, a surgical replacement part that was placed within the body became very important in this case as well.
Oof. And then we know after the body was found, GBI is working on trying to identify who this person is. We know then that phone call comes in that says, hey, her roommate's been missing since May 1st. How quickly after that was the GBI able to identify Michael and say, now we know who this is?
Obviously, with that phone call, that's going to immediately trigger a response by law enforcement to go to the place of Michael's residence or where he was last known to be. We're looking for, items that belong to him, personal effects, his hairbrush, toothbrush, because now we're thinking DNA, right? So that would have triggered an immediate response to go to the location that the roommates obviously stated he had lived before he went missing.
Mm. All right. Now, all of these podcasts that I do, all of the cases I cover on TV, there's always a dead body. There's always a dead body, but we just kind of breeze past that and say, oh, they found his body. In this case, it was a school bus driver with children on the bus who saw the body in a ditch. I don't want to guess how many dead bodies you've had to see and what it must be like. So, walk us through the reality of when a person sees a dead body, and even with your experience and expertise, when you see a dead body.
Well, one of the horrific things about this discovery of Michael Haegele is unfortunately he was discovered by innocent children
Mm.
on a school bus, not something that you ever want your child to experience. If you read through the files and the narrative, you will know that the children told the bus driver they thought they saw a body in the ditch, and the bus driver initially did not believe the children, but they were so adamant about what they had seen, it caused the bus driver to turn around
Mm.
and then go back. So to me, as the protector of all children, self-proclaimed, I was horrified at the thought that, as you mentioned, I've seen more dead bodies than I can count. But the fact that children had been traumatized by what they saw lying there in the ditch on the side of the road was just unbelievable to me. But I hate they had to go through that. But fortunately, they did. And Michael's body was discovered. And then ultimately, justice was served.
And that's that double-edged sword, the trauma they went through. I'm sure they had nightmares. And let's just say you are not self-proclaimed protector of children. You were the head of the Child Fatality Review. That's how we knew each other and met. No insignificant task. Now, when you go through an investigation like this, and then you start to uncover the details following those breadcrumbs, and you learn that not only was there a $500,000 policy out on Michael that left Jason as the beneficiary, They also found a $250,000 life insurance policy on a man in Delaware who died under suspicious circumstances in 2007. And we know that then in 2012, after this conviction, the Delaware prosecutors charged Jason in that death as well. Is it a serial killer? If he hadn't been stopped, could he be someone that continued on and on? And are you surprised when you find cases where they've also done this before?
Not necessarily surprised, but we certainly, in this investigation, the GBI had to rise to the challenge once they realized what they possibly had on their hand. You did have someone who, first of all, had never, if he had never made that phone call to say that his roommate was missing, I don't know that Jason Slaughter would have ever been brought to justice.
Wow.
And I say that because the case that was being investigated in Delaware had somewhat reached a dead end. Investigators, if you read through the narrative, were very frustrated. Jason was very cunning. Jason was a criminal justice major, had studied in criminal justice. So he thought that he knew how to outsmart the system and outsmart investigators. So if he had not picked up the phone that day, I don't know that investigators would have been able to connect the dots between two states and two cases to use evidence in one and the other to help bring this young man to justice. I will tell you that there were times when this young man pretended not to be able to ambulate or walk on his own. When investigators initially went to the house, Jason presented himself in a wheelchair. So again, presented himself as someone that you wouldn't normally, a criminal profiler may not necessarily look at and say, uh, this person has perpetrated a crime, right? But it was very interesting. He was very cunning, and this ball of thread just began to quickly unravel, but it did not make the task any easier necessarily for investigators to piece this together. Every element had to be proven as far as what his motive was and how he wanted to go about doing this, because after all, Donna was the one that pulled the trigger. We were able to show the manipulation and the control he had over her to use her as his instrument, his catalyst, to his overall master plan.
Of greed. I mean, this one's such a clear sometimes we talk about cases and it seems like they're multiple sins. This one is greed, just straight up greed by these two, the mastermind, Jason. Um, the reality in a case like this is, thank goodness he's been caught. But also, if you think you're too smart to outsmart law enforcement and outsmart a conviction, just like Brian Koberger, who thinks he's the smartest person in the room. In fact, somebody in jail has described him as he's the smartest person I've ever met. Well, guess what? Still caught, now convicted of 4 murders in Idaho. So you can't outsmart everybody by committing the quote unquote perfect crime. All right, Trebor, any other facts or details that really stood out to you about this case?
You know, as I mentioned, Jason trying to outsmart law enforcement and throw him off the trail, if you will. One of the things that became very apparent about his manipulation and his control over Donna was Jason was found to be sitting on top of Donna's documents, her passport. As investigators developed a rapport with Donna, it was found out that he had begun to isolate her. Just like a classic, narcissist, he had isolated her from any family and friends that she had, because she also had met him online and had moved here from London. And, she didn't have any friends or family that she was in contact with. He had taken away her cell phone. Again, I mentioned she didn't have access to her documents to be able to leave what we found out was an abusive relationship. with Jason. And I say all that to say, although she was a willing participant, she was definitely a part of his master plan as to how he was going to get rid of Michael Haegele and collect this life insurance money. He had developed a romantic relationship with Michael in the home in front of Donna, who he married, and she became his wife. And this scenario played out in front of her day after day after day, which in turn sent her into a jealous rage. So it's all very complicated, but it was all very calculated by Jason, who, as we mentioned, thought that he was able to throw law enforcement off the trail and plan the perfect crime.
Wow. Often, the things you just described amount to mitigating factors at sentencing, so that often when you have a mastermind and somebody who's been manipulated, they get a lighter, different sentence. Interesting to note. And again, she admitted to her willing participant action of shooting him in the back of the head, but they got the same sentence. The court did not consider this as mitigating enough to not give her the same sentence. Each of these individuals did get life in prison plus 15 years. Their roommate, Michael, sought friendship and belonging, and instead, he was a victim of cold-blooded betrayal. Trebor Randle, can't thank you enough. First, for everything you've always done as an amazing agent with the GBI. Second, for joining us today to help break it all down.
Thank you, Ashley.